had provided us with a perfect transition to talk about one of my new favorite books. Anybody here seen Frenchie? Which I should remind esteemed audience is either available now or soon would be, or soon will be, so you can be pre-ordering your copy, and in a few days it will be available for you. And as promised, I will not summarize your book, so tell esteemed audience what they need to know about Frenchie so we can talk a little bit about it.
Oh, sure. Anybody here seen Frenchie is the story really of a friendship, into my way of thinking. It's most of the chapters, there are multiple points of view, but most of the chapters are from Aurora Pauline Petriquin, who is a really loud, impulsive kind of kid. She's actually kind of had trouble making and keeping friends over the years because she's just so out there and just kind of exuberant. But the book has her in she opens with her in 6th grade, but come 3rd grade she flashes back to when she met Frenchie Livernois, who moved in to the house next door actually. And Frenchie was really kind of her new shot at a friendship. Frenchie is non-vocal and autistic, although I don't really say that much about it in the book. I'm mostly looking at the behaviors, which is a thing I do. I really like to kind of paint the character on the page and let that stand without doing a lot of labeling. So he just sort of silently chooses Aurora for his person and follows her about, and she really becomes what I call psychologically responsible for Frenchie. She looks out for him, but he does okay himself. And in fact, when they hike around in the inland areas of Maine, they do live in a coastal town, but they often spend a lot of time in the woods. Now he's often the one who knows his way home, and she'll be likely to wander around and get not really lost, but just a little off track. And he always makes it home first. That's one of the things that she notices. But what was on my mind is that with a friendship of that kind, what happens when these are two kids who are probably being given strategies to kind of socialize them. That seems to be an all important thing in middle school. And for me, I was asking myself, what happens when those strategies begin to work better for one friend than for the other? Or what about just a kid who's going to grow into her place on the spectrum, whereas another is going to not change as much. And of course, that's kind of the setup for her becoming distracted one day and Frenchie not turning up to his classroom. She usually would be the one that would turn and kind of loop him in and say, we're going this way now, And he's, of course, very geared to pattern and to being able to predict what his day is going to be like. There are a lot of things. She says he gets a lot of things and he's used to a lot of things. Even though he doesn't speak, he will know what's coming next and he will follow. And, but she's one of the people who can really get through to him. He's also got this connection to birds. And so she'll often use a bird sound or a reference to birds to get him to do the things she wants to do. She's very much an outdoor kid, and that's one of the reasons that they hang around in the natural world so much. But yeah, she misses something, and he wanders away from the school one day, and then this search ensues, and so the story really becomes about for me, one of my other questions was, how do people become lost, and how do they stay lost? Sometimes when I'm watching these shows on TV, I think to myself, what did someone in the community miss that they might have seen even out of the corner of their eye, but just not register or just not think was important? It may be until later in the search or something where it dawns on them that they saw something. And what about someone who saw something but isn't telling, or maybe can't tell what they saw? And so that's how, this title, Anybody Here Seen Frenchie, kind of has two meanings, because Aurora feels that Frenchie is kind of ignored at school too, or not seen by the other kids, that they don't read his behavior the way she has learned to. And so when he actually goes missing, then that's when that title kind of has two meanings to it. So yeah, it's about and it's largely about a community getting together. And this is where the multiple points of view come in, which I had such a great time writing. I mean, just writing a little passage about what was distracting someone from seeing the boy who entered the field right behind them, that was fascinating for me. And then, one thing that I like to share about this book, I still only have the arc, so this wasn't the finished. I used maps a lot when I was writing this book. I had a whole thing out, and I sent this messy map, into my editor, and the illustrator who did such a beautiful job on the cover also did this incredible map that I think kids are going to really enjoy seeing how it was that people missed where Frenchie was. And I kind of can't wait to hear feedback on that from them. So yeah, just, I don't know, just kind of slipping down inside a bunch of different characters to feel their feels and write their parts, It's kind of like that business of imagining a memoir, imagining that you were there during that time, and that you are that person experiencing that thing. And when you're hunting for a missing friend, I think that that's a lot of emotion.
Well, as you were describing the novel, there is a plot. There's a very not a straight line, but there's obvious conflict that's introduced, and we're following right along. But you started with character, and mostly you stayed with character. And so I'm curious, because we said originally that this starts as not a dream, but a notion that you have, that you're writing on the 3x5 card, flapping and tweeting a bull in the earth, and that's your end. So how from that do you get that it's the characters and that it's going to be Frenchie and Aurora?
Right. Well, Frenchie, as I said, has this connection to birds, and one of the few sounds or motions that he makes is he'll flap and then make a tweeting sound when he has seen a bird. And sometimes Aurora has not seen the bird with him, but other times she has. And it's just one of the things that he acknowledges in a way that that the rest of the world can read as, oh, that means he saw a bird. So I think, for me, it was a visual. I saw him flapping and doing this, sort of sound, a bird sound. So that was an automatic connection to character. And the other, I think, was about, just kind of, I keep referring to sort of the natural world and this bull in the earth. I don't think it's really a big spoiler to say they visit a quarry at one point, and that is the thing. And I went and hiked a couple of different places, but a particular quarry in Maine. And, I was photographing it and thinking, this is very beautiful and very dangerous. It's an abandoned quarry, of course. I mean, not inactive. And it was so interesting to see the way nature was taking back the rock, for me anyway. Little pine trees managing to find root on these ledges, and yet the man-made drilling of holes. I guess they put something akin to rebar or something in to hold things while they make a cut or something. I didn't find out a lot about granite harvesting, but I certainly saw the evidence of it, which was interesting. But I think there are a lot of times I think quarries do feature in stories as being sort of something that has incredible depth and darkness to it. And the temperature down center of a quarry can be really dangerously low because of how they're fed, the water source. Also because quarries have been sort of filled with artifacts of the past, everything from, bed springs to the netting that they used for the blasting, which, was metal and dangerous. And the grout, or it's called, or tiny, tiny rock, that tiny exploded rock, is quite sharp too, and can be loose and slidey. And I thought, yeah, there's all kinds of havoc that could happen here. So, that's what I was looking at. And I was thinking, I love the beauty of this, and I love its danger as well, in terms of being a writer and looking for a setting and a story. So that's how those two things ended up figuring in. I knew I needed to go see the quarries to understand this bowl in the earth feeling. So
you hike, I think you said you hike or ski there every morning before you start writing. So are you out?
Yeah.
Are you out looking for places where Frenchie might have gone and kind of plan? I mean, obviously you're not in Maine, but
right. I'm not in Maine now. I'm in Connecticut, but I visit Maine every year. And I went back to Maine kind of in the off season, in the shoulder season, to really research this book, because I'd never really been there in September, which is the month that the story takes place. And there were differences in the light and in the temperature and in the color of the foliage and things like that that just really got, I wanted to get right. And in some cases, since they were searching, the amount of sunlight left was of utmost importance. And I wanted to know what the slant of that was, what was the color of pink like, and what time would everything be happening. And so there I am out there just waiting for it to get dark, and kind of watching, the sun go down, and the darkness behind me, or the light behind me, whichever thing was happening. So I felt it was really important. It's also just looking for what like I say, what was turning in terms of ferns and things like that, what was going on. And just the quietness of Maine when there wasn't a lot of traffic on Route 1 in the summer, things like that. Just a feel for that was important, I thought. So I was, they're taking tons of photographs. couple of Septembers ago now.
Well, how precise do you feel you need to be when you're describing setting? I often think of Avi, nice name drop, but when Avi was on here, he was talking about writing historical fiction. He would look up the weather on the day, and he's writing, something that happened 100 years ago. And I'm thinking, nobody's going to catch that. And he's like, well, no, I'll know. I know what the weather was on the day that I'm describing. Do you feel the need to, where are you comfortable slipping into fiction and saying, well, I'll write what it needs to be for the story, versus this is a real location. I know I'm describing exactly, if you go there, you're going to see exactly what Frenchie and Aurora see.
Yeah, in terms of place, it's such a good question. In terms of place, I'm usually looking pretty closely at it. I prefer usually not to name specific towns. I'll often change the name of a town, but it will be based on a place. And what I find is that when I'm doing something like referring to maps and things, often that's where the goodies are. The true things about it are gifts. Routes and trails, and what I find out sort of what's there for me that works in my favor, and really I could really use that. I suppose I exploit it to some degree. What I avoid in terms of truth oftentimes is, if there's really a certain house or something at a certain corner, I might change the name of a road or something, because I don't want anybody to be bothered. I was inspired by this, didn't use it precisely, made some changes, who knows why. And then, I love when they get in touch with me and I tell them why, because I didn't want anybody to, think that that's who really lived there. I didn't want them to think I was writing about any real person. You don't want something, you don't want anybody's privacy invaded, even though you weren't writing about them. If something comes real enough for somebody, they could make assumptions that are not right. And so, that for me is my caution with place. Yeah, and the rest of it, I had to be following full moon, the moon for another book that I wrote, A Home for Goddesses and Dogs. There are moons on the cover of this book. That was really important because the girl, a recently orphaned girl, her mom was kind of a practicing pagan and was very interested in the different kinds of moons and what they would mean and what attention we should be paying to them. So I had to kind of get them right. And I had to sort of choose a specific year and stick with that calendar because, well, the copy editor comes back at you with that stuff anyway. They're fact checking and that kind of thing. But and so I can see why Avi, who I adore, would need to. I think for historical fiction, I think that we are. I think we owe our readers the truth on that. I do think it's important for that. I really do.
Yeah, most writers I've talked to do. Which is
why is that right?
The greatness of Avi is probably beyond me. So
well, and me. And me. He's a fascinating storyteller, isn't he? So great.
So you've got an ending in mind, you've got your setting that's coming clearly into focus. So when does it come to you that these are going to be specifically Aurora and Frenchie, and that they're both going to be somewhere on the autism spectrum?
I don't know if I remember precisely how that happened, but I knew I had this, loud girl in my ear. I always feel like, the tone of the book and the voice kind of comes in through my writer's ear, and I begin to sort of hear them chattering about. In this case, it was so interesting that I had one character that was non-vocal. And by the way, we refer to him as non-vocal because he actually, we can't say he's nonverbal because he apparently does process language to some degree because he can carry out a command if he tunes in, and he responds to being spoken to. But he doesn't speak, so therefore, not non-vocal. So and I think I was thinking about friendships. I have known, we probably all have, I kind of have observed just the difference for a kid who's on the spectrum in different ways. And of course, I've had them in my, I've had, really brilliant kids who can write, who were probably on the spectrum, who were in my different teen writing classes and things like this. And sometimes they tell me all about it and other times they don't. But, you can kind of sense out how socially the other kids aren't sure how to interact with them. They aren't sure how to be included. And, and yet there's an ebb and a flow, and often years down the line, it's all kind of, it is all kind of ironed out and is all working, and I think that we teach acceptance now much more than we used to. And, I've always say, really, we're all little weirdos. And so that I think is, I think that's great that we're acknowledging, and celebrating our differences. And, it just leaves so much more room for everyone to accomplish what they want to accomplish, have a fulfilling life, and be contributors. That's the thing. I think that's when most of us are at our happiest, when we can be contributors. And that's what I want. I guess that's kind of the thing I wanted for Aurora. If I think about a character that, what do I want for her as I write about her? What do I think she craves, whether she's super conscious of it or not? What would be the thing what would be the great gift to give her? And I think that, mattering, making a difference. It's I saw a kid with I knew she was a good-hearted kid, yeah, I think that what happens is all the characters are kind of composites of various people I've known or read about or can imagine. It kind of comes from those three places, and always as composites. Yeah, so I just knew that this was something I was interested in. The friendship interested in me, as I said. Yeah, it is so hard to put into words when it becomes, when it becomes exactly about those characters. But boy, once they're really there and they've attached themselves to the situation, the burbling is pretty loud and pretty constant. It's not very organized. I would never be an organized writer. But that's when I can start sort of, I often start with listing scenes, scenes that I know are going to happen in this book. And they don't even have to be the super pivotal scenes. It's just something I know about these two characters, an interaction that they had or something. And those I find get sort of meatier and meatier as I list them and make them and spend some time writing them. Some scenes become not important enough to include, but maybe just something I needed to know. And they can be very short things. And I find myself reordering the scenes then, and that's like in the beginning of the process. And then there comes this point about a third of the way through where, okay, now we're going to kind of go from this 1/3 point and we're going to kind of have a through write. And then usually somewhere around 2/3, I really hear the final scene and I'll go ahead and I'll write it. And that gives me this trajectory to aim for, so that I think I get a better feeling about the middle, which can get weighty and soggy and wet and sometimes long, and that helps me keep that tight if I know, okay, and I do sometimes think to myself, okay, writer, shortest path there, don't drag this out, don't do that, because I sometimes feel like my books get too long. I would love to, I keep landing around 320 for pages, and I'd love to land more like 220. I think a lot of the stories could be told in that many, but then again, from art school, I learned, how long did it take you to make that painting? It took as long as it took. I had a professor who would not let us talk about that, So, and then in the revision process, we can still trim. So, yeah. And sometimes my editor will make suggestions for that,